Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. All right, Game of Her Own listeners, I am so excited about my next guest. I know, I say that every week, and I am genuinely excited every single week about the guests that I'm bringing you. Okay, so a question. Have you heard of The Gist? You're either nodding your head and saying, yes, of course, Jahaan, I've heard of The Gist, or you're just saying no, but I'll Google it. Don't Google it. Just go to the show notes after you listen to this episode, because I have all the links you'll need to become Gisters. So what is The Gist? It is a sports media startup that creates this amazing sports content and experiences in a community, all by women. And it's for all sports fans. They have a twice weekly newsletter that gives you the gist of everything going on in the sports world, a weekly podcast that also talks about what's going on in the sports world. You can find their fantastic content all over social media. I'm not gonna lie, I feel pretty cool. I was fangirling a little bit, but I got to sit down and talk with Ellen Hyslop, one of the co-founders of The Gist. She gives us a behind-the-scenes look at how she and her co-founders took their business from a side hustle and just an idea to this incredible business with 35 employees. And get this, she and her co-founders were named to Forbes 30 Under 30 list for 2020. So whether you want to start your own business, level up your career, you want to listen into my conversation with Ellen. We talk about all the things. We talk about how they made their jump from side hustle to a full-time business, the sacrifices they had to make for a full year in order to make their dream a reality, what it's like to run a team of 99% women, and how they view competition, failure, and my favorite, listening to your gut. Oh, and definitely stick around to the end to hear the worst piece of advice Ellen has ever received. All right, ladies, you ready? Let's do this. Ellen, I have been waiting months to say this. Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I am so glad you're here.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Now, we are going to dive in, and I can't wait for you to tell everybody about your amazing business that you and your co-founders have created. But before we get there, talk to us a little bit about when you fell in love with sports.
Oh gosh. So when I fell in love with sports, I honestly couldn't tell you a specific date because I feel like it's just been a part of my life since I was a little kid. To give a little bit of background, my dad is a massive sports fan and I was his firstborn, and I think right away he just kind of took me under his wing and brought me into loving sports and to being all about sports. Since I was honestly 4 years old, I said that I wanted to be a sportscaster. And actually on the day that I was born, so on the day his first child was born, I was born super early in the morning, and that evening he was supposed to go to a Toronto Blue Jays playoff game, but because I was born, he had messaged his buddies, called his buddies and said, hey, I just had a kid. I'm not going to be able to make it to the game tonight. My mom's still in the hospital. And his buddies were like, what? Why don't you just still come? It's the playoffs. What do you mean? Mary and Ellen will be sleeping. It'll be totally fine. So on the same day that I was born, less than 12 hours later, my dad had left and he had gone to watch a baseball game in the playoffs. And the Jays ended up winning the World Series that year. So that just kind of, I think, gives a good background as to maybe why I also feel like maybe I was just trying to love sports because I've been trying to, cover his affection or something. But yeah, it's been literally forever since I've loved sports.
That's hysterical. Oh my God, that's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
12 hours later, firstborn, I'm out. Wow. All right. Whatever it takes.
Yes. Yeah. So it's been a long time since I love sports.
Now, I don't know how old you are. I know you're very young, but did they win that year?
They did. So they won in 92 and 93 back to back. And I was born in 92.
Okay. You didn't have to tell us what year you were.
Oh. 92 or 93 with the Blue Jays.
True. I did ask the question. I guess I set myself up there to feel old. That's why I was like, oh man, gosh, I feel old.
No, it's all good.
Oh, I was in high school then. That is crazy. All right. So tell everybody what you do now.
Yes. So I am one of the co-founders of The Gist, and I'm also the head of content. And The Gist is really all about leveling the playing field in sports. And the way that we're doing that is mostly through media. So we have a free twice weekly newsletter that gives you the gist of what's going on in sports in less than a 5-minute read. All of the content is completely written, edited, produced by women, and it's all for underserved sports fans. It's a really authentic and genuine voice, and we try to talk about what we feel like people actually care about as opposed to all of the stat lines, all of the numbers, everything like that. So it's really perfect for someone who's interested in sports, but maybe doesn't have time to watch all of the games or to watch Sports Center, or who honestly just wants a different voice in sports and a different way to talk about sports. So we have our free twice weekly newsletter. We also have a weekly podcast. Our podcast is called The Gist of It, where we also kind of dive a little bit deeper into what's happening in the world of sports. We have Instagram as well as Twitter, both for Canada and the US. And it's all about creating community around sports, providing content that people are looking for, that's all created by women, and, you know, trying to change and level the playing field in sports as much as we can in a way that's from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. So we just try to listen to our gisters as much as possible, get all of their feedback, understand what they want, and implement that the best that we can across all of our channels.
I love that you call us gisters, because I'm like, hey, and I'm like, I gotta think of a good name for my my podcast, but I haven't come up with one yet. But I love how you say that every time. So I love The Gist. I'm a huge fan. But take us back. So that's your full-time job now. Take us back when you first graduated college, and like, what did you do? Like, what did you want to work in sports? Where did your path take you?
Yes. So I went to school for commerce, so for business. And actually, I think that I fell into the rhetoric of, I was always interested in high school and university in business, but I was still always interested in sports as well. And I think I fell into listening to the rhetoric about people with sports in terms of, you have to work super hard hours, you have to work long hours, you work when nobody else is working, and you're not going to get paid that well. And also, to be honest, like, there's only so many spots for women within the sports industry. And so because of that, I ended up, instead of going the journalism route for school, ended up going to business school, also where I met my co-founders, had a great time. And as much as I still love sports and was paying attention to sports and wanted to ultimately get into sports, I actually went into insurance, which is a very random for me. Yes, but I was an underwriter, insurance underwriter. And what I do really appreciate with where I worked beforehand as an underwriter is that you really have to think critically. You're always thinking about what could happen. You're always thinking about fact checking everything. Mm-hmm. You have to be a really good communicator. You have to be a really good negotiator. And so I think some of those things have helped in terms of The Gist. But I think also because we weren't in the sports industry right away, the real unique angle of The Gist is that we are truly all fans, and that we kind of understand how fans interact and chat and how they want to be spoken with as opposed to be spoken to. So it's a very weird pathway to sports.
You know, it's interesting. So I know a lot of women who want to get into sports, right out of college, and that's all they can think about. So I know that you want to get into sports, but how did you say, okay, you know what, I need to take this insurance job? Like, how did you make that decision? Was it a difficult decision to make?
Honestly, it seemed like from the first year of school, that's almost how you were I don't know a better way to say this, but it's almost how you were groomed, almost, that you were going to be working in the finance world or the client service world, or you're going to be working for a CPG. Just with the type of undergrad program that we had, there was maybe a few people that got into sports, but it might be more on the agency side, for example, or it might be, okay, you're going to work for Pepsi or something like that, but you're working with the athletes that Pepsi could potentially endorse. So it didn't seem like I was going against the grain, I guess, of what the program had kind of taught us, because there wasn't really any at the school we went to, any sports marketing, sports media, anything like that just wasn't available as a course. So I just I a little bit, I would say, had my blinders on to, this is the job that I'm going to get out of school.
Okay. And in the back of your head, were you thinking, all right, I'll eventually get into sports? Like, this isn't the end, right? It's just my first job.
I always, yes, definitely wanted to get into sports. Every time there was a sort of conference at the school that was around the sports industry or sports media, always bought my ticket, always went to that conference, always went to every single speaking event. Every single summer, I was trying to connect with folks. Either I'm from Canada in Hamilton, so I was connecting with people in the CFL and in the NHL, trying to meet people and understand more about the industry and learn about different internships and whatnot. So it was always there and in the back of my mind. But as I learned more about it too, I think that I still needed to understand what I wanted to do first, and like what could be the unique step within the sports industry that I could take.
You're doing some amazing things. Like, your team has been named to Forbes 30 under 30. Let's just pause for a second. That's amazing. That's incredible. So first off, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It's very sweet.
When did you start? So you're working for Chubb, and when did you start working on the GIST? Were you doing it as your side hustle? Like, take us through that process.
Yeah, so the idea for the GIST came up super organically one night in 2017. So JC, Roslyn, and I were all friends from school. And earlier that year, I'd actually torn my ACL playing soccer. So normally I would have seen JC. You did too? Oh my gosh. It's a horrible...
It is. It's a horrible injury. It was my senior year, and it was during a scrimmage. Like, the season hadn't even started yet, and there was like 5 minutes left. Like, and I didn't need to be in the game. It was one of those things. Yeah. Anyway,
it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating, so fluky, and it's wild how common ACLs are. Like, you look across all sports, both genders. It's wild.
Yeah, it's horrible. And it's just so like gut-wrenching, right? Like, you just are like, right, I can't play. You kind of think you can, but no, you can't.
No, and it's so different when you come back. Actually, just before I came on, Klay Thompson just came out saying that he tore his Achilles. So he just came back from an ACL, and then he just tore his Achilles, and he'll be out for this NBA season too.
Oh gosh, sorry. Like, I have pain in my Achilles right now.
Totally. I feel so bad for him. That's just so bad. But anyway, so I guess the reason why I bring that up is because normally I would see Rosalind playing soccer. We played soccer every weekend together. JC and I would probably go out to the bars pretty frequently together. And so because I couldn't walk really at this point, or I had crutches at this point, we all decided to just get together for some takeout at Rosalind's place. And it was a Thursday night, and the night before the Toronto Maple Leafs had played, and the night before basically solidified them for making it into the playoffs this year. And I was jazzed because the Leafs for many years hadn't made it into the playoffs. 2017 was supposed to be this big rebuild year. No one expected it. And the way that I was speaking about sports to JC and Roz, they were super engaged in the conversation. They really learned a lot about what I had said, and they kind of said, whoa, this is really fun. This is the first time that I've actually really enjoyed talking about sports. And both of them had grown up playing a lot of sports. They'd grown up watching different types of sports, but they grew up also never really feeling like sports were for them. So never really wanting to flip on the TV and see a panel of a bunch of guys talking at them, or turning on the TV mostly during playoffs, for example, and being part of the community that really builds around sports. Or when they're at the office, even if they knew something, they felt like they were being talked around or not invited to a conversation. And so we kind of thought about in that moment, I said, yeah, like a bunch of people, men and women, will text me and be like, hey, can you tell me about this? Or what's going on with this before, while they're watching a game, going on a date, going into the office, what have you. And so we thought, whoa, this is kind of cool. Like, if JC and Rosla are experiencing this, and there's a few other people too, what could we do to solve this problem? What could we do to basically expand and provide the experience that JC and Rosalind had that night to a bunch of other people? And so literally that night we poured another glass of wine and opened a Google Doc on Rosalind's TV and kind of Chromecasted it and just literally started writing out all of our ideas for what this could be. There was no name yet, but we were like, this could be a newsletter. Maybe we could have an Instagram. Maybe we could host a radio show, just all of those different types of things with the gist. And then we just started asking people what they thought about the idea, like literally didn't keep it close to our chest at all because we just wanted so much feedback. And the feedback overall was that, hey, this is a pretty good idea. You guys should look more seriously into it.
Gosh, okay. So it's crazy that the ACL tear like kind of led you there, right? Like, you
totally.
know, and having those glasses of wine. So when are you still in school at this point, or are you done with school?
I'm done with school. So we all graduated in 2014. So we had been 3 years out of school, all working downtown in corporate Toronto. And so really the first year and a couple of months of the gist was a complete side hustle. So it would be, because I wasn't playing any sports or moving too much, I was writing a lot of the content that would live on our website. We would all get together basically every single weekend to walk through basically putting together our business plan, who would be doing what did we need from a technology perspective, what would timing look like, all of that sort of stuff before we launched with a real small soft launch in Toronto in December 2017. And at that point, it was really just one Instagram channel and one weekly newsletter that came out every Monday. That's how it started.
Okay. So when did you get that courage to say, I'm done. I'm leaving my insurance job and I'm starting, like, this is going to be my full-time job?
It got to the point, I think a lot of people probably resonate with this if they have a side hustle that they're really enjoying, but it got to the point where all three of us were just thinking about the gist so much during our full-time jobs. And, you know, we thought, okay, if we're thinking about it so much and we're so jazzed about this opportunity and idea, then we should start to think about how we can make this something sustainable that we could actually make money off of or raise money for, what have you. And what was really cool is around that time, which would have been, I guess, like February 2018. So a full year since that first night at Rosalind's, one of our gisters reached out to us and said, hey, there's this really cool program that Ryerson, which is a university in Toronto, the DMZ, which is the number one based kind of university incubator in the world, is hosting this thing with Facebook, and it's called the Facebook Journalism Project. And 5 teams across Canada will receive $100,000 of non-dilutive funding, as well as $50K in Facebook ad credits. And so we saw this opportunity come off our desk and we were like, oh my gosh, if we get this, this is when we quit our jobs. So we worked our butts off and put together a like really great deck and really strong first application. And we sent that in and we got selected to be in the top 10 that ended up pitching in kind of like a Shark Tank / Dragon's Den-esque type thing. And then we pitched in front of a panel of judges and we were selected as one of the top 5. And a part of our pitch too was like, if we get this, we're quitting our jobs, so that they knew that we were serious, because there were a lot of people that were already full-time applying for it. And so it was once we got into that program, which also came with free desk space, mentorship, and also just a stamp of approval from an incubator like the DMZ and a company like Facebook to kind of say, okay, this is a legit idea, that helped us push it over the edge and quit our jobs.
Ooh, that's intense. Okay, so for people who don't know, because I learned later in my career what an incubator was and an accelerator. I was sitting around with a bunch of people and they're talking about it. And I'm like, okay, I got to go look this up. I have no idea what they're talking about. So for people who aren't familiar with it, can you explain what that is?
Yes. So the best way that I could kind of explain an incubator is basically comparing it to like what a baby would be in once you have a baby, when the baby's put in the incubator and they have kind of like either tubes to help them breathe or to feed them type thing. It's basically when your business is almost at this like infancy of its idea and you need all of the support that you can get to be able to take it to the next level. So our idea with the gist was really at its MVP stage, so our minimum viable product stage. And we needed the support from a cash standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, from a mentorship standpoint, from a workplace standpoint, in order to be able to take it to that next level. So it's really places that give you resources to move forward. And then the next stage after an incubator would be the accelerator. So you have a product, but it's about pushing yourself as much as you can to really get it to that next level.
Okay, you explained that a lot better than I would have. Okay, talk about how many people applied for that. Do you know?
I think it was around 100 companies.
Wow, that's so intense. What an incredible opportunity for you guys. So you quit your jobs.
Yes.
And it became full-time. So was it just the three of you, or did you have did you bring on other people to help you?
Yeah, at the beginning, it was just the three of us. And so, yeah, really for about a year and a half, it was the three of us. And once we quit our jobs, it took us a year and a half to actually pay ourselves. So we didn't pay ourselves for a year or so, just because we needed to use all of that money to really put into the Gist and to spend and to make our product better and to try out different types of things. So now, though, we have a full-time team. So the three of us plus Carrie Ohm, our social media manager. We're 4 full-timers, and we'll be making some more full-time hires next year. But then between some of our consultants as well as our part-time team, a lot of our team is part-time right now. We have about 35 people working for us all together, which is super exciting.
And that's so exciting. So here you are, like, leading these teams, right? Like, of people.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's super fun.
What was that like? Okay, so I asked this question because so often people come to me and say, I want to manage a team, but I don't have leadership experience. So I'm not going to be able to get the job, or my boss isn't taking me seriously. Like, just talk us through what it was like to be able to lead a team, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, for like the first time.
It's been a really great experience. And I think what's so cool about the majority of our team is that they are Gisters, and they are women, and they believe in our mission of leveling the playing field. They love our product. They love the newsletter, and they truly want to help. And so what we've tried to do is surround ourselves with people who are just way smarter than us and who are way better than us at what we're doing and can really just like elevate everything that we can do. So I think that there's so many things with leadership that we've learned and that we've had to go through and that we've read a lot of books on, and that I think that the biggest thing that we've all been kind of talking to our business coach about is that there isn't a one size fits all plan when it comes to leadership and when it comes to leading big teams. Each person within the organization is going to be needing different things from you, is going to be expecting different things, learns in different ways, wants to grow in different ways. And it's up to you as a leader to not only make them feel comfortable, but to make them feel needed, which they all are, but also to feel like they have a challenge, like there's opportunity for growth, that they're really valued. And so it's been really great because we are also very vulnerable leaders and transparent leaders, especially as a startup. It feels like you have to be to say like, hey, look, this is our plan, but we also don't know if we have budget for this next quarter, or we would love to do this, but we have to be a little bit scrappy with this, or, what do you think of this plan? How do you think we should be leading? And asking for feedback as much as we can from all of our employees now. So it's constantly changing, and we're constantly trying to be better leaders as much as we can.
That's such great insight, right? Because you're just being transparent and you're figuring it out. I think the best thing you said there, and you said a lot of great stuff, but the best thing was, I hire a lot of smart people who are smarter than me, and you are okay with that. Like, you realize that you need that to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they're all surrounded by each other. And right now, obviously virtually, and actually for the most part, our content team is virtual anyway, but then they're all surrounded by each other, and then they kind of feed off each other. And it's just really cool to see how everyone's kind of growing together.
Yes, that's great. And the transparency part, I think, is always key. The one size, doesn't fit all. And then the transparency, I just think it just helps your team trust you, right? And want to do better work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something too, that with JC, Roslyn, and I coming from a little bit more of like a big corporate side of things, it was something that moving into smaller kind of business, something that we said, okay, this is the way that we didn't like to be treated at our kind of corporate roles, what could we do that's different with the gist in a way that we would have liked to be treated even when we were entry-level employees. And so we always like to keep that in mind, especially when we're working with so many amazing women.
Hey, Jahaan here. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I am sure you are thinking about your own career right now and how you can pull out in front of the pack to take your career to the next level. For 18 years, supporting women in sports has been my favorite part of my career, and I would love to support you. Whether it's joining my free Game of Her Own community or one of my one-on-one coaching programs, I am here for you. Send me a message at jblake@jahaanblake.com or DM me on Instagram at jahaanblake, and let's schedule a time to have a free session. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, let's get back to why you're here. Okay, I have a funny question. At least I think it's funny. So you're in this male-dominated industry, right? Whether we like it or not. It's sports and it's how it's been. And we're all working to change that. However, you guys have a huge following. And I imagine with that comes some trolls. So have you guys been trolled and how are you handling that?
Yes, I feel like just any woman in sports has definitely been trolled or had some really horrible remarks said to them, or you just feel the sexism from the industry in a totally different way. I will never forget this one time I was at this conference and there was a guy who was a gister and he read the newsletter and he was a great subscriber. We have a lot of men who subscribe to the gist as well, which is awesome. And I introduced myself and he was like, so you write for the gist and you're a co-founder. And I was like, yeah, this is, yes, that's what I do. And he said, so you actually know about sports is what he said. And in that moment, I actually replied to him. I was like, did you just ask me if I actually know about sports? But I just told you I'm a sports journalist. And I said to him, I was like, would you ask me that if my name was Alan instead of Ellen? And it totally took him aback, and maybe he unsubscribed from the gist after that. But I just think that, would anyone actually say that to a guy? If a guy said, oh yeah, I'm a sports journalist, never. Or if a guy said, yeah, I'm a sports fan. But for a lot of our gisters, when our gisters say, yeah, I'm a sports fan, and if they're a woman or an underserved sports fan, or they just don't fit that avid fan mold, people are always questioning that and people are always quizzing them. And so I think that's also part of our community, because we're like, as sports journalists, we feel that same way, that feel questioning way, but our gisters also feel that way because they're also being constantly questioned and quizzed about their fandom. And to us, a sports fan is anyone who's felt anything about sports. Like if you cheered once in your life watching the Women's World Cup, like that's great. You're a sports fan. And so we just never want to question that. So those are the type of troll things that we would get relatively frequently. Plus when, the folks on Instagram will sometimes be like, why are you talking about the WNBA? No one cares. And we're like, go away. You don't need to be on our channel. So we'll just have a nice little clap back to them and we're on our merry way.
Yes. Oh my goodness. The quiz, it drives me insane. And you know what drives me insane? I'm getting a little fired up here. What drives me insane is that it comes from women too. It's totally just not men, right? So I don't want our this interview to be about bashing men. It's both men and women who do it. And I'm just, wait a second, you're supposed to be on my side.
Well, it's like institutionalized almost, right? Like it's like that unconscious bias that you just grow up, that you don't see it. So then it's not inherent to you. And so then if it's new, you're like, what? It's that side of thing, I think, that we're experiencing.
Yes, you said, that's the right, thing to say, the unconscious bias, right? So it's built on, in my opinion, it's the tradition and what people are used to and what they've had growing up, and they don't even realize it. So my favorite conversations to have with people, and I've had one, with a close friend of mine, is just calling them out and then being open to being like, oh, I didn't even see it that way, right? It took some time to get there instead of being defensive, right? Because I think when I was junior in my career, I got very defensive. And now it's like, oh, this is an opportunity to actually teach and show you what the words that are coming out of your mouth, how damaging those could actually be to somebody and insulting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that language is so powerful. And when people have those thoughts and the way that they speak them, it matters.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit more about what it's been like to work. And I know this is a general question, but I'm sure that listeners would love to hear what it's like to work in a male-dominated industry when starting your own business. Like, how has it been for you all?
This is kind of funny because we were so green, to be honest, we were like totally oblivious to it for a while. We were just doing our own thing. We were having a great time. We were working in an office just surrounded by a bunch of other startups. We've never really been in like a sports specific office. Mm-hmm. We've created our team is majority women, like 99% women, and they all talk sports. And so honestly, it was not something that we really felt until it got to the point of raising money, until it got to the point of talking to other teams and leagues to create partnerships with them, until it got to the place where we could be more client facing is really where we started to feel it. And also when we started to become the thought leaders on different topics and people came to us to go on TV, go on radio shows, podcasts, etc., where we realized, oh, we are different. And so I think the biggest thing has been when we're pulled into the other areas of the sports industry that's not the gist. That's when we feel it the most. And definitely also in the raising process of raising money, venture capital, angels, everything like that. The majority of those folks are men, and they are a little bit of the gatekeepers to a lot of money. And especially when you're creating something for underserved sports fans, which maybe they wouldn't necessarily fall under, that's always been kind of an interesting conversation.
Yes. So, and I literally just got lost in your words. I was like, yes, that's good. That's good. And I totally forgot what my next question was going to be. But thinking about the raising money and having to go out there and like pitch and talk to all these men and women, right? What was that like? And what was that feeling of just putting yourself out there?
Yes. So there was a lot of learning that came with that we just give so much kudos to the DMZ, as well as Techstars, which was an accelerator that we went through that helped us with kind of understanding everything that we needed to know with raising money, as well as we got really lucky to meet one of our mentors super early on who helped us kind of think about raising money. We read a lot of books. A lot of this was spearheaded by Rosalind too. She's an amazing financial mind. And so she was like, okay, I've read this book. This is what I've learned. This is what we should be thinking about when we're meeting these other people. This is what we should be thinking about in terms of equity and things like that. And JC is an amazing saleswoman and really great does a really great job of talking about the gist from this like high level perspective and the opportunity that there is for someone to be able to invest in us. But I will be honest with you, like we did decide to go the non-institutional route. We had some meetings with VCs, or we had some meetings with different funds, and it clearly just wasn't the right path for us after those meetings with them. And so we decided to go more so, receiving money through incubators and accelerators, but also the angel route a little bit more, as opposed to some of the larger VCs. And I think for us, a lot of that too is we want people invested in the gist who are just like super great, down to earth, kick-ass people who also understand that we need to grow and take advantage at the times that we feel like we need to be growing and taking advantage, and not feel like we need to be pushed into a certain silo or be pushed into doing a certain thing because of all of this pressure from the top. So it's been a really interesting process and something that we learn more and more of all the time.
Women who are listening now, maybe they don't want to start their own business, but they're at a manager level or director level, and they're working, and maybe they're feeling that same way. It's like, this isn't working for me. This isn't the right path. And you guys had the courage to just find the path that worked and is working for you guys, which takes a lot of courage. I love that. That's great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, it's the biggest thing is just like to be authentic to yourself. And if you have that weird feeling in your gut, it's probably not feeling great. And generally JC Roz and I will make a decision. And then if we all kind of feel weird in our gut, or if one of us feels weird in our gut, we'll come back and we'll be like, do we really want to do this? And then we'll be like, oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. I don't really want to do that either. And so it's nice to let ideas marinate too, because you could definitely go through the full process and you could think that you make the right decision. And it's smart to think about things, and it's smart to do your research, and it's smart to try out all these new things. Like we took all of these meetings, we did all of these pitches, we did, we went through the rigmarole, and it wasn't until we had gone through a few of them that we were like, oh yeah, this didn't feel right the whole time.
What advice would you give women who are listening? How do you figure out the difference between that feeling in your gut that it's not right, or that feeling in your gut that you're nervous and you may not want to do it and put yourself out there?
Well, it is hard to balance, I think. I think something that I've learned is that intuition, especially intuition in sports, is super important, I find. But at the same time, data does speak volumes. And so when making decisions, we always like to pair it with data as well. And so not only will we look at kind of our internal data, but we'll look at other companies or people who we think are similar to us that may have been put in similar situations and say, hey, do you mind hopping on a quick 20-minute call? We really want to pick your brain about X, Y, and Z. And so then we can learn from them and kind of, I guess, gut check ourselves against someone who is maybe a year ahead of us or 2 years ahead of us, either in the same role or same business or something like that. And so I think regardless of, what industry you're in or your position, there is generally someone who you could bounce an idea off of or bounce something off of that is a couple of years ahead of you or is thinking about the same trajectory as you. And it's really great to get advice from those people, because those 1 or 2 years actually can make such a big difference in perspective.
That's good. And between the three of you guys are real. That sounded really odd, but you know what I mean. So yeah. Do you have to check each other and give each other a reality check? Hey, those are nerves talking. We don't have time for that. Or let's talk about why you're so nervous about that. Do you kind of help each other as well with that?
Yeah, I think that we're a really dynamic team, and it's awesome because we all have really complementary skills. And that would be one of the biggest things I think in working with a team and a co-founding team, is that you really have to trust and respect each other, but you also have to understand, who is doing what and what falls to each person and what are their strengths and what are their areas for improvement and how you can kind of fill in everything. And so there's definitely times where it's hey, we're going for this. Let's just do it. Or it's times where, maybe we should hold our horses for a little bit on that idea before we can gather some data or ask our sisters what they want or something like that. But I would say all together, we just try to keep the lines of communication open as much as we can, to be each other's cheerleaders, to be, each other's shoulder when we're thinking about things, and just, leveraging the power of three.
Yeah. So it sounds like to me, those who are working in an office right now or working for an agency and trying to figure things out, it sounds like to me that transfers to making sure you have your own board of advisors or your own 2 or 3 people that kind of think like you and are as ambitious as you are. Right. And have those same sort of goals and would help you kind of move through those moments, because there's some big moments in your careers where it's hard, right?
Totally.
It's hard work. And I don't know how else to say it other than whoo, and it takes a lot to get through it, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think too, a big thing with the GIST too, is we sometimes in the corporate world, it could get kind of competitive because you're oh, I have this one associate job, but there's only 1 spot for consultant or 2 spots for consultant, but there's 5 of us. Just for example, I've never really seen those titles in my old insurance world, but just as an example. And I feel that creates kind of a competitive environment. And one of the biggest things that we've wanted to do with the GIST is if we all learn from each other and we're all pushing each other up and we're all asking each other's opinions and we're making it super collaborative, it should be like a team on a soccer field, should be a team in the corporate world where, everyone from the keeper up to the forward, a goal is a goal is a goal for everyone. And so that's something that we love to keep in mind too, is that there's no competition across our business. It's if our writers do an amazing job and the sales team sells an amazing thing, great. That's an amazing job by everyone around. And so I think that that's also something to keep in mind when you're thinking about these board of advisors or mentors or people who you think are on the same page as you. It's also people who have that like team mindset side of things as opposed to a competition mindset, I think is important.
Yes, that is gold. I mean, we could just cut that little part out and that could be the podcast. That's fantastic. You guys have put yourself out there. You're running a successful business. What is it? You have 160,000 plus gisters. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. In our community. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. So talk to us a little bit about, I think what makes us stronger and how we empower each other, women empowering women, is when we just hear about how like we've tripped and fell and we bounce back up. Right? Something has bent us, but not really, it didn't break us. So talk to us a little bit about your journey and maybe something that you encountered in terms of failure and how you bounced back from it.
I think what's interesting is that I would think of failure so differently beforehand than in the last few years. I think now, like, failure is a welcome friend and failure is someone who we learn from. Whereas beforehand, in the first 3 or 4 years of my career, failure was something that hit me really hard. And then it would take me about a week or so to then be motivated by it, as opposed to now it's like we fail, we learn, we move on. I think the biggest thing now is like, no one's dying. We're not brain surgeons. We're not heart surgeons. We're just talking about sports. If we, don't get a breaking news item up right away, or if we say by accident a score is 2-1 versus 3-1, everyone's still alive the next day. And so I think that, you definitely want to be putting out as high quality stuff as you can and be as professional as you can, but it's okay to fail when you put things in perspective. I would say though, like when I was at Chubb, I did apply for a couple of job promotions, and as much as, the company was like, we value you, you're a top performer, you're maxing out on all of these different types of things, I didn't get either of those promotions. And a lot of that to me was saying, they don't see my potential. Do I have potential? Am I actually good at this? Is this not the right job for me? Am I totally over my head? Like, is it me? Like, what am I doing wrong in my day-to-day job? And I would start to kind of like internalize all of those different types of things. And at the same time, kind of the gist was going on. And JC and Roz were like, look, there's other things that you love so much more than potentially getting this promotion. And there's so many things that you are good at that could be involved in this promotion. And it's not your fault that they're like not seeing potential, and like you're seeing, 10 years down the line and they're seeing like what's right in front of them. And so I think just having, I guess, those hype women is great, but also just like totally reframing failure, like welcoming failure, I think is really great because you learn from it and get better every single time.
Yes. It's hard to think about it when you're in the moment, but I'm telling you, like what's really funny is I just had a couple of days ago, happy hour. So cocktails and conversation, because I love a good happy hour.
Love that.
With women in sports. And, we were talking about picking each other up, like, and self-doubt and all this stuff. And I was like, you guys, you're going to fail. If you're going to put yourself out there, no matter what, you're going to fail. You're going to mess up a meeting. You're going to mess up a big project. Like, it's going to happen during your career. It's just how you recover. And the very next day I had a meeting and I don't know what happened to me, but like I lost my words. I was all like, I couldn't not get it together. I was like, oh my God, this woman's going to think I'm horrible. And you know what? It was fine. She was like, I'd love to be on your podcast. And, and like she's at such a high level. I was just like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. And she was like, I love it. I'll be on your podcast. No problem. I was like, phew. So no one died.
Amazing.
It's fine. Yeah. And I know next time, like certain meetings, I should go in with like, just prep a little bit. Like I kind of went into it like, I got this. And I was like, you know what? I forgot to prep. Like I prepped, but not as well as I should have. And that was my biggest takeaway. I had to reframe it. Sometimes you're running high for so long. Sometimes you just need something to happen to be like, oh yeah, I'm human. Like I make mistakes.
Knock you down a peg. Totally.
Yes. Like sometimes I don't mind that. I was like, well, that humbled me, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. So I have one question. Tell us, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I've ever received. Honestly, there's two ways that I could kind of go with this. I would say, could I do one that's the worst advice and then one that's like, actually, we'll just go with the best advice.
I like that. I like that. Yes.
Okay. So I would say the worst advice that we ever received, and I think this was from a GIST perspective, is that we were meeting with someone super senior in Canadian media. And it was more of just an information like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. We're just going full time with this job now. What would you do if you were us? And, still have a lot of respect for this person. But what he said was, I don't think that this is going to turn into anything. Why don't you come and work for us here? Say no to that $100,000 and we could create the gist out of this media conglomerate. And to me, that was a little bit like, okay, so he thinks the idea is legit, but he doesn't think that we could do it or pull it off. And it just made you like double think about like, oh my God, should we be doing this by ourselves? Should we be, partnering up with a big media company that already has all of these resources and has this brand? Like, what is going on? And it's basically saying, no, don't do it, is I think the biggest thing that we got there. And so getting advice from people who don't have you in mind and who have themselves in mind, I think is just a major red flag. And I would think like the best advice that we have ever received is to, and this is like, it is so cliche, but it is to be working on something that you are so passionate about, because you're going to be working on it like 18 hours a day. And you have to be the hardest worker and the first person awake or the last person asleep. And you have to be that person who people turn to when the going gets tough. And the only way that you're going to be able to be the rock that you need to be, honestly, 365, 247, is if you're passionate about it. And if you're not passionate about it, that's going to show and trickle down to the rest of the team. And so you can be passionate about anything. Like, people are passionate about insurance. People are passionate about sales. People are passionate about retail and clothing and everything like that. But I think it is, find your passion and find your people and try to do both together if you can.
Yes, that is great advice. All right. Tell us, everybody, how they can get in touch with you, follow along. Tell us all the things about The Gist.
Yes. So would love everyone to subscribe to The Gist at thegistsports.com. And that's GIST sports.com. We also have some merch right now too. So if anyone is interested in buying some merch for themselves or gifting others for Christmas, you can also check that out at thegistsports.com. And then otherwise, we'd love you to follow us on Twitter or on Instagram. For our Americans, it's at The Gist USA. And for Canadians, it's at thegistnews.ca. Right. And then our podcast, would love to have you guys listen to our podcast. It's the gist of it is our podcast.
And when does that one come out?
Every Wednesday morning.
I have been looking forward to this, and this has not disappointed. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, this was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I'm excited for everything that you're doing with this podcast too. So thank you for what you're doing as well.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.